It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com.
Welcome to Sober University, your next step to successful recovery, with Cheryl Adler, who says if you are going to crave anything, crave living life to the fullest, maximize all you have, and squander nothing. This program provides information to help you get your physical, mental, and spiritual house in order. And now, the host of Sober University, Cheryl Adler.
Hello, Rockland World Radio listeners. I'm so excited tonight. My guest is Carmine Thompson, master interventionist who hails from the LA area of California and travels throughout the country, facilitating interventions with a 97% success rate. That is outstanding. Carmen's contact information is 1-800-980-3927. I'll say that one more time for you. 1-800-980-3927. And Carmine can be reached on his website, which is interventionallies.com. Carmine, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Hi, it's so great to hear your voice. Welcome to Sober University.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I know that when we've spoken before, we just had endless things to talk about, and so I think it's going to be like that this evening, where I don't know if we'll actually get to cover everything, but let's hope we do. Could you start by sharing your personal story and the significant impact it had on your work?
Well, I actually kind of fell into doing interventions, and it surprisingly has become more of a calling for me at this point. I didn't know that there was this field to even get into. I was doing what's called 12-step calls a lot through central office of one of the 12-step programs. Wound up doing it on someone who knew somebody who owned a treatment program. They heard about how I was able to direct this person towards treatment, and the person said, that sounds like an interventionist. I'd like to meet him, and he did that and wound up getting into interventions. On a personal note, though, because I lost my brother to an addiction, I really, gravitate towards this in the sense that, for me, it's paying honor to my brother's memory to try to help others.
That's exactly right, Carmen. I would really like it if you could tell our audience about what happened to Tommy, your brother.
Well, he, was a pretty dynamic young person. I mean, he was all areas of his life. He was a fantastic kid, and then he started smoking pot, and things progressively got worse over the years. And a week before his 26th birthday, he went to Jamaica and overdosed and died.
So tragic.
Yeah, to this day, it's still something that really tears us apart as a family, because we never presented him with the opportunity to get help. We didn't know that there was this type of a service that people do. We didn't know as much as people know today about recovery and putting people in rehabs. So this was all foreign to us. We were pretty much uninformed family, hoping that he would somehow, some way snap out of it. And, of course, that didn't happen.
Yes, and I would imagine that when this was going on with your brother Tommy, that there was a terrible sense of helplessness for your family, which is really quite a contrast to the empowerment that you give to families as an interventionist. And we will get to that a little bit later in the show. One of the things that I wanted to address for the moment with you, Carmine, is that my show right now at this point in our calendar is focusing on holiday blues and coping with all the kinds of feelings that people have around the holidays. It's just not a ho-ho-ho time of year for so many people. I was wondering if you could share with our listeners how you can help people during this time of year.
Well, for many, this is a very tricky time of year. A lot of emotional stuff comes up. People have to get with family members they may not have seen, or be in situations where they feel are, slippery areas. I do think a lot of mental health is based on perspective. I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the speaker had just celebrated 15 years of sobriety. He happened to get sober during the Thanksgiving week 15
That's
years ago.
fantastic.
Yeah, and he took a different perspective on the holiday season.
What was his perspective?
Well, it's quite interesting. I mean, he mentioned, for one, all the parties that people in recovery throw during this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of networking and assistance out there for people. There's 24-hour meetings that go on. There's a lot of people in the community coming together, understanding that some people are going to find this a tough time.
Yes.
He also talked about, if you were to get sober now, come January 1st, you can let people know you got sober last year.
That's so true.
I thought that was a great way of looking at it. And
Yes.
then he said, come January, we're actually going to get a lot of new business. So you can really be instrumental in helping the new people that come into the program.
That's right. You can really jumpstart your sobriety right now.
Absolutely. So again, I think it's how we perceive the times and what they are. I do know that it's real important to stay close to others during this time of year that are in recovery. So if you have to go home and visit family and you're a little uncertain or unsure, see if there's somebody that you can bring with you that's in recovery alongside you.
So you're really talking about how to reach out and offer support to others, whether they're your friends or your family, and to be sensitive to their needs.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better.
That's great. That's really wonderful that people should not feel isolated, which I think many addicts struggle with, that is to just withdraw. And what you're saying is you're reaching out to make the connection.
Yeah, and I do think that, there's a lot of truth in, nothing will ensure sobriety more so than one addict, alcoholic, helping another.
Yes, because there's such an ability to relate to one another with what the struggle is and what the emotions are around that.
And also, for me, when I was, newly sober, if somebody had like 30 or 60 days and I only had a couple of days, I really identified with those 30 and 60-day markers. Those were things I was shooting for. Sometimes if people had 10-plus years or whatever, I didn't identify as much. So if you're just newly sober in the program, don't ever feel as if that you're, not somebody who can really be instrumental in somebody else's process.
That's a good thing to know, because sometimes people feel, well, I'm a newbie, what can I really offer? But you can offer your heart. You can offer reaching out and holding somebody's hand. And I think there's great comfort in knowing that you're not alone, and I really want to emphasize that because addicts so often isolate.
Very true. That is part of the problem with our disease.
Yes, exactly.
We go deeply into ourselves.
So it is a wonderful time of year that you should be with us now, and I was wondering, Carmine, if you could share what your philosophy is around being an interventionist.
Well, I see the intervention process as the ultimate act of love. It's humane and it's responsible. In fact, interventions are no different than sending a search and rescue party out for someone who is lost hiking in the woods, or sending a life raft to someone who is lost at sea. In each instance,
it's a beautiful metaphor. In fact, I have a chapter in my book called Floundering in the Sea of Addiction. So I can relate to your metaphor as well, that you would want to send a life raft out for somebody and not permit them to drown. You couldn't stand on the shore and watch that happen.
No, and that's typically, exactly what's going on. Of course, when it comes to an intervention, we're also dealing with someone who may be minimizing, denying, refusing, or avoiding help entirely.
Yeah, so you're really looking at all of the defense mechanisms that are so common to people struggling with addiction, is saying, I don't really have a problem, I can stop anytime I want, it's not a big deal, I only had 2 drinks, etc., etc. Or there's projection, I'm doing this because so-and-so really upset me and stressed me out, it's their fault.
there are oftentimes implausible excuses and reasons, and that's part of the, difficulty of breaking through to somebody when it comes to an intervention. And oftentimes families sometimes, will buy into some of those things. Maybe it's the girlfriend, or if the job is stressing this person out, or for any number of reasons. I mean, I have to tell you, when it came to Tommy's situation, and he moved, we thought, okay, new environment, that'll be great. But unfortunately, Tommy brought himself with him.
Yes, the problems went along with Tommy. He couldn't leave that baggage behind.
Yeah, and again, if addiction is untreated, it is a progressive illness. It gets worse. It doesn't. Oftentimes, it doesn't just go away. I mean, there are instances where people will, some event will happen in life. Maybe they are about to have a child, or for whatever reason, and they are able to somehow get it together. But by and large, the majority of people really do need assistance when it comes to getting clean and sober.
Exactly right. And that would lead me to asking you if you could share with our listeners how you came to this wonderful description of making an intervention a surprise birthday party.
Well, a lot of times, families would talk about, this ambushing, or somebody, would mention that, oh, this is ambushing the person.
Right.
And, of course, in the planning stages of an intervention, it's similar to when you plan a surprise birthday party for someone.
Yes.
You naturally don't tell them about it. We kind of want people to keep the same patterns and behaviors going, so that we know where they're at and we can, do the intervention with them.
Right.
So in that respect, you wouldn't say, oh, this person threw a surprise birthday party for me. They all ambushed me. Right?
How dare they make me a party?
Right? I mean, those people, I can't believe them. And for me, the other side of that is this. I mean, this is, in fact, a birthday. It is a opportunity to be born again. Those of us in sobriety have our natal birth date, and we have our recovery date, which is our other birth date.
Yes, which is a wonderful one to celebrate for sure.
Yeah, so this to me, it's twofold. It is a way to keep people from talking about it, because we want to keep it private, and it's also a way for the person to get an opportunity to start getting their life back on track, to come
Absolutely.
back to shore, so to speak.
Yes, for sure, Carmine. I was wondering if you could expand on your view of addiction and how it affects the pleasure centers of the brain, which I believe is such a critical aspect to recovery, is understanding brain addiction.
Well, I mean, it is a brain disease. I mean, it's occurring primarily within the limbic system, which is where the pleasure center is housed.
Can you tell my audience what is the limbic system? It may be a little technical for some people.
Well, it may be too technical for me, too, to tell you. I mean, it's made up of a number of areas, but it's typically the lower region of the brain. It's it does house the pleasure center, where people receive their reward.
Right.
And in simple terms, this area of the brain has literally overpowered the cerebral cortex area, which is the higher region, or the logical region.
Yes.
And they are in conflict with each other. When somebody's actively addicted, they're continuously thinking in terms of, this will be the last time, or just one more, or, if I switch brands, or if I, any number of things, I'll be able to somehow manage to gain control over this. Whereas the upper region, the cerebral cortex, reminds the person, or sends out the messages, you can't keep doing this. If you do, you're doomed. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your house. You're going to lose your wife, kids, any number of things. So those two areas remain in conflict. And in fact, to me, in recovery, it's also very interesting, because as the limbic system, or the pleasure center, is the lower region, and the cerebral cortex is the higher region. I always think in terms of, successful recovery being, am I going to listen to my lower self or my higher self?
And how does that actually become balanced out between those two conflicting areas? Because we really want people to understand that they're not giving up pleasure when they become sober.
Well, here's the thing. Because, look, it takes about 2 months for the brain to just start normalizing after you, interrupt the addiction, whatever it is,
right.
drugs, alcohol, etc. It'll take about 2 months just for the brain to start normalizing. It could take up to 2 years for the brain to heal.
Absolutely.
But
the brain does have something called neuroplasticity, which does allow it to learn new things and to heal.
Yeah, and so people really have to give themselves time.
And patience.
Exactly, because, the brain has been altered, and the structure could be changed, and it's just going to take time. I know, like for me, it took a long time before, I started feeling the same sense of awareness. I remember it was 6 months, in fact, when I walked outside one day, and it was as if the clouds, disappeared, and I could see clearly.
Isn't that wonderful?
It was that moment of clarity that you oftentimes hear people talk about, but it is the brain that needs to heal, and it is a constant, realization that, it's not the drinking, it's the thinking.
Exactly right. Whatever your drug of choice is, it's having your brain heal so that your clarity of thought is the thing that really helps to transform you.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, tell me some of the fallacies. I think this is a really critical piece of information for people to have about hitting bottom. What is wrong with the thought that when people say, you just have to let them hit bottom? Tell us what is wrong with that.
Well, I mean, for one, it continues to shift. So, I'll use my brother as an example. If he could have ever saw how addiction was going to progressively change him and alter him in the ways it had when he, was younger and saw what he was going to look like in 5-10 years out, he would have certainly said, wow, at what point would I have, got a hold of myself and stopped? So when you're dealing with a brain that's, becoming altered and those lines keep shifting, I mean, the idea of hitting bottom just doesn't resonate. Bottom could be, for someone, it could be possibly they get a DUI and they realize, whoa, okay, this will snap them out of it. But for others, their brain, because it is a brain disease, everybody's different. So for some people, it's just there is no sense of bottom. Bottom would have happened a long time ago, except for the fact that they are experiencing something that is consumed them, and they can't shake the obsession to drink and use.
And I also think that hitting bottom could be the tragedy that happened to Tommy, that for some people hitting bottom is not coming back.
True, and when you say coming back, we're not just talking about death. I mean, there can come a time when it's, one drug too many or too many, and, the brain is permanently, changed and that's it. I mean...
The brain has become so damaged.
Correct.
Yes.
I have a friend who, overdosed, and he's come back today, but he's not the person that he was, and he needs, 24-hour health care now. So
how sad.
Yeah. So,
he's a young man.
Yeah, and this is the scary nature of what we deal with, and don't like to be the alarmist with families, but the reality is, left untreated, we're dealing with a disease that is progressive, and it
absolutely
will cause serious harm and repercussions. So to wait it's irresponsible. You wouldn't wait for someone who's lost in the woods to find their way back if they've been gone for a while now and they're running out of food and something harmful can potentially happen to them. You would go out there and you would do something. So
Absolutely. Carmine, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I'm a cancer survivor, and I'm alive now because I made a very early intervention for myself. I didn't sit around and say, it'll just go away. It's not that bad. So I think that is another fallacy about addiction.
No, you do certainly have to take proactive measures. I mean, even in my own case, I was not ready to get sober when I got ready. I mean, my brain was still, being dominated by the pleasure center, and I just wanted to keep using. Of course, I knew that this was, inevitably it was committing suicide or playing Russian roulette each time.
Very slow suicide, yes.
Exactly. But the thing is, we have another saying, bring the body and the mind will follow. You have to get somebody, right? I mean, if you get somebody sober, you're now dealing with somebody who has a little bit more clarity so they can actually make a choice today. Because when somebody's actively addicted, there isn't much of a choice. I mean, the disease is, the brain is so centered on using and so focused on that each time you wake up or whatever, or come to, in my case.
Yes.
You're deadlocked on that, and there wasn't a choice. I mean, I was constant craving. So give me a little time to, interrupt the addiction, get some, footing underneath me. I was able to look at, wow, okay, now I can kind of make a choice, because now I'm dealing with maybe super strong desire, or I'm dealing with, an incredible urge. But when we're dealing with the phenomenon of craving, and that is constantly consuming every single thought of yours, it's very hard to resist that.
It certainly is. And I know that there are some medications that can also help people grapple with their cravings much more successfully.
True, and it also depends. I mean, if it's, meth or crack, I mean, it's a little bit different.
Yes.
More so now in the area of opiates. With, I'm not going to mention them, but, there are some medications for that.
Right. We don't have to get so technical on this show, but there are many tools out there to help people, and I think that's the message we really want to convey, is that there is real help out there.
There most certainly is. There's a lot of caring, loving people in our communities, the recovery community.
So let's segue into, how do families get involved? How do you work with family members who could be very well-meaning in their intention, but what they end up doing is they make excuses, they enable, and they actually help perpetuate the disease process? How do you actually bring families into the intervention and help break that cycle and help them become real facilitators of recovery?
Well, this is a systemic family disease, and there are different moving parts to this, and different people are playing different roles, enabling codependency. Some people, have turned their back entirely on the person because of, for a number of reasons. I mean, I kind of started feeling like that towards my brother Tommy. I was just so angered by him and disappointed that, it's like I didn't want anything to do with him.
You were so fed up.
I was fed up.
Yeah.
And it was also because I didn't understand what he was, the suffering he was in. I just, saw the manifestation, the behavior, and thought that he was weak-minded, and, that was, an issue for me.
So you were making some pretty heavy judgments on him.
Yeah, unfortunately. And so, when it comes to families, I really understand a lot of different dynamics that go on within the family, but I also know that there are ways that families can be very supportive of recovery and not enable addiction. So a lot of what I do is teach families new ways, new approaches, new methods to engage the addiction, but also to get involved in the recovery.
So that does change the family dynamics dramatically.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if the family doesn't know what recovery looks like and they don't know what their loved one should or shouldn't be doing after they leave treatment, then, it makes it very hard for, there to be a high chance of success or a high rate of success. I mean, if you know that when your loved one comes home, these are, aftercare plans and suggestions, and these are things that, should probably be happening.
Right.
And my thing has always been, look, if we notice there's a problem, we address it before it becomes a crisis. looking away is not the answer. Not doing anything is not the answer.
Of course, that is a form of denial.
Yeah, and ideally that does change. When I work with families, they're more proactive than they've ever been. They're reaching out more. They have somebody such as myself to talk to get an opinion on, this is happening, this is occurring, what do you think, what should we do? And I love being able to offer families new tools and skills on how to approach more so the recovery end of this, because that's, getting someone into treatment we've been very successful at that. It's really what we want to do is make sure not only do they get the treatment, but that they successfully complete treatment, and then we have a really good plan in place.
Exactly right. You want to see it to completion, and of course there are many different stages of the recovery process. In the interest of time, Carmine, because I think that we are coming soon to the close of our show, I was wondering if you could comment on your reference to Adversity University and what that means to you.
That's funny. I had thought about writing a book with that title. And what I'd like to say is when I saw your book, Sober University, which I have to say is a really incredible read, and I want your listeners to know I am going to shamelessly plug it right now.
Thank you so much.
Cheryl Adler wrote a book called Sober University. It is incredibly well written. It is very comprehensive. And in fact, when I read it with a highlighter because, there's so much. I was like, I love this book. It's brilliant.
Thank you so much.
But anyway, the idea of Adversity University struck me as a great way of sharing the other side of hardship, coming through challenges, difficulty, and adversity with a new appreciation and perspective for life.
Absolutely. Yes, so tell us a little bit about how can people cope with their adversity, because I think that's where the pleasure center of the brain kicks in and says, no, 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 I want to feel good right now. I don't want to hurt. I don't want to struggle. So how does adversity really play into this?
Well, I think for one, it's often hard for people who like to go from 0 to 60 to, to learn how to sit and be patient, to learn how to sit within themselves. But again, I think so much of it has to do with perspective. For me, I oftentimes would remind myself, as tough as I have it or as tough as I've had it, I mean, there are people on the planet who have it much worse than I. I think gratitude is hugely important.
Yes, gratitude for sure.
I think you sometimes just have to understand that life is not one big, fast lane ride. I mean, sometimes you need to go for just a walk. Smell the roses around you at the moment. Just be in the moment. Be present-oriented.
Well, sure. When you walk, you can see things a lot more clearly than if you're in a racing train where everything is just a blur.
And I'll offer two more suggestions.
Sure.
One, there's two realms that don't exist, and that's the past and the future. They don't exist. They're gone. And that's not to say you don't address the wreckage of your past or plan for things you want to do in the future. But ideally, emotionally, to live in either of those places on a continuous basis is very harmful to one's mental health and successful recovery.
Because then you're missing out on the moment, the now.
Exactly, and taking stock for, look, your fingers and toes and whatever it is that you have to be grateful for is really important. The other thing is that, the brain is a radio station. We're on that tonight, aren't we? But, sometimes you can't control what thoughts come into your head. I mean, they just, out of nowhere, something comes into your brain. But what you can often do is change the thought. You don't have to hold it and stay focused on it.
Sure.
And that's important for people to understand that you can actually change. If you were driving and somebody ran in front of you on the highway, you would immediately hit the brakes, and your brain would just whatever you were thinking about, you stopped. You thought about what was in front of you at that moment. Okay.
Sure.
Well, there is an ability to do that. To okay, this thought that's coming in, I'm beating myself up. Do I have to buy into that? Is this a good station to be on right now? Well, yeah, Rockland Radio absolutely is a good station to be on.
Yes, we love Rockland World Radio.
Okay, but am I listening to a station inside my brain that is an old tape that
Absolutely.
is destructive?
So you have the option to hit the delete button and say, no, I want to replace this with something much better for myself.
Conditioning, perspective,
And perception.
And perception.
And perception. Carmine, one last message that I would like to ask you to leave my listeners with, because having you on my show tonight is just so wonderful to hear you speak about the success of intervention. Is there one last message you'd like to share just for tonight?
Well, I always tell families that we have something more powerful than the powerful hold addiction has over their loved one. Yes. I think that power is love.
Yes.
It's really it's a dynamic force. It's it supersedes everything else. Embrace yourself. Love yourself. Utilize it, and turn lemons into lemonade.
That's a good idea. Carmen, it is both a pleasure and an honor to have you on Sober University. And there is such a great need for your services and your wealth of knowledge. I hope that you'll come back to the show in the near future and share some more.
I would gladly come back, Cheryl, anytime you ask.
Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best on all your future interventions, because I want to repeat, 97% success rate. Carmen can be reached at 1-800-980-3927, and his website, interventionallies.com. That's all the time we have for now, unfortunately, because I'm having such a good time. Please join me next Tuesday at 8 o'clock and meet a remarkable woman who struggled for decades with food addiction. And she has some great news to share with you. She has lost 125 pounds and is a tenacious, courageous woman. For more information, please contact me at rocklandworldradio.com. You can also contact me at info@soberuniversity.com on my website, soberuniversity.com. Until next week, please remember, if you're going to crave anything, crave living your life to the fullest. Maximize all you have and squander nothing. Thank you.
It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com